Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
I mean, in some sense, I think the Platonic ideal state is a very tiny reasoning model with 1 trillion tokens of context that you put your whole life into. The model never retrains, the weights never customized, but that thing can reason across your whole context and do it efficiently. And every conversation you've ever had in your life, every book you've ever read, every email you've ever read, everything you've ever looked at is in there, plus connected to all your data from other sources. And, your life just keeps appending to the context, and your company just does the same thing for all your company's data. We can't get there today, but I think of kind of like anything else as a compromise off that Platonic ideal. And that is how I would eventually, I hope we do customization.
Artificial intelligence, your own personal demon. Welcome to Training Tuesday. The Rob Maness Show is live on World YouTube, our X Spaces simulcast, Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku. Wow! That was Sam Altman of ChatGPT. His words are worth repeating, and I'll quote it. We want ChatGPT to remember your entire life. The ideal state is a very tiny reasoning model with 1 trillion tokens of context that you put your whole life into. The model never retrains. The weights never customized, but it can reason across your whole life context and do it efficiently. Every conversation you've ever had in your life, every book you've ever read, every email you've ever read, and everything you've ever looked at is in there. Plus, it is connected to all your data from other sources, close quote. The light bulb came on for me when I reached out to schedule today's guest, and he sent me one of the tweets that he put out. This was what he wanted to discuss today. And his comments on Altman's idea with ChatWouija PT, from the Ouija board, you get your own personal demon who looks over your shoulder 24/7, offering life advice when needed. Who the hell wants this exactly? Close quote. We'll be discussing this plus for where we're at with AI and how it will impact American jobs today and in the future. My guest today is War Room's tech editor, Joe Allen, author of Dark Aeon, Transhumanism, and the War Against Humanity. And that's the groundbreaking, absolutely groundbreaking book revealing the dangers of AI and the intent of many of the people and entities seeking to advance it, like Mr. Altman there. The introduction in Dark Aeon's Amazon page says, quote, like a thief in the night, artificial intelligence has inserted itself into our lives. It makes important decisions for us every day. Often we barely notice, close quote. Joe, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, sir.
Rob, very good to be here. Thank you very much.
And you know what? It's been too long since I've had you on. I'm going to have to try to get you to come on the show every quarter because this stuff is going too fast. You're, I think, the best expert to talk to because you're honest about it. I mean, this Altman guy.
I do my best to, if nothing else, be wrong truthfully.
Well, exactly. Look, nobody's right all the time. I certainly am not. Ask some of the trolls that follow me. They like to find it.
Every September, right?
Yeah. But honesty is the key, though, especially with this. We got to be clear-eyed about this. Altman's video clip there, when I read that, when I saw it, and I read your tweet the other day when I contacted you, I thought of the words, it is like a thief in the night. Nobody's paying attention at the right level to what's going on. Am I right? It's just like you wrote
Yeah,
about.
it's in the last maybe 2 or 3 months, it seems like the world has discovered artificial intelligence. It's not that no one was paying attention to it, but I'm seeing a lot more people, especially teachers, and also people who are in the coding industry, right, in the computer
Mhm.
science fields, because you are starting to see jobs being replaced by AIs, especially in coding and in customer service. Now, ironically, it's not so far, it's not working out that hot. For instance, there is a fintech company called Klarna, and they made this really big deal about how they were going to replace hundreds of workers with AI for customer service.
Mhm.
And the bots just simply didn't work out, and now they're scrambling to get people to come back. And one hopes that the AI won't advance so quickly that suddenly within a year or two, millions upon millions of jobs are wiped out and nobody really knows what to do. One hopes that that kind of fumbling approach to all of this will be the norm. And I also think that you have all of these companies who are using the threat of replacement, the greater replacement of humans by AI and robots. They hold this over their employees' heads, sort of like you would hold potential scab labor over a union worker's head, or hold foreign labor over the head of a native worker. I
Mhm.
would like to think that by this time in 2 or 3 years, it will be human workers who are really sticking it to the people who are holding this sort of threat over them, saying, with good reason, saying we are not replaceable. But you don't know. I mean, one thing is for sure, most of the big companies have signaled an interest in replacing human beings with AI in white collar
Mhm.
fields and replacing human beings with robots in blue collar fields. The intent is there. You know they would if they could. The question is, will they be able to? Can they do it? Is the tech going to be good enough? We shall see.
Yeah, I mean, I keep telling people, look, AI at this point, it's a computer program. It's a lot of computers using a lot of data and a lot of electrical power to look at that data more rapidly than we've ever been able to do the things that computers do: bring data in, analyze it, query the data, submit, spit out a answer about queries, those kind of things. And it's got machine learning too, so it can take tasks in its own way, but it's not going to be sentient. And it's certainly, it's, I don't think it's ever going to be to the level where Sam Altman's talking about in my lifetime anyway. Of course, that's short, probably shorter than most here. But in my undergrad, I was a programmer, a systems analyst, and designer for computer systems that do this kind of stuff. Very basic back then, but still, it's the same thing, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I do think that it's easy to kind of mystify the whole thing and think of AI in terms of some sort of, uh, science fiction like personality. It's not exactly that yet, but it isn't, as I oftentimes say, this is not your grandpappy's chatbot, right? It's not
Yeah.
like Eliza. Eliza was really important in its day. That was a computer program that was created by a computer scientist, Joseph Weizenbaum, I believe at MIT in the 60s. And he used the psychologist Carl Rogers' technique of eliciting responses from people, kind of like a psychotherapist would do. And a lot of people in this very simple chatbot, a lot of people found themselves confiding into, to this machine.
Hmm.
And basically, that was the state of chatbots until in the 80s, there were advances. The early 2000s, there were advances, but it didn't really take off all that much. It was really in 2017 when OpenAI began using what's known as the transformer architecture that they had gotten from Google. Google had open sourced the technique. And so it's 2017 where OpenAI really starts developing a large language model, GPT, that can, in many ways, imitate human reasoning, or at least human cognitive processes beyond what the previous chatbots would do. You know, people could rightfully say for most of the history of chatbots, the machine is just programmed to do that. And that was by and large true. There was a little bit of flexibility, but for the most part, there were certain keywords and associations that were programmed, hand programmed. The large language models like GPT, like Grok, like Gemini, like Anthropic's Claude, these are very, very different in their nature. They're very different in their capacities, and they're really different in their degree of freedom. So yes, for sure, AI companies kind of choose what the chatbot is going to be like, in the sense that they choose what training data they put into it, and they put these guardrails around it to kind of steer it away from certain topics or towards certain topics. But it left to like the raw LLM, large language model, the raw chatbot has enormous freedom. And because it's trained on the entire internet, basically, and in every book, basically, and all these social media interactions, it has enormous range as to what it could do, and it just follows its own path. And I think that degree of freedom is what's so creepy about it. That and its ability to articulate. It's not, again, it's not HAL from 2001: A Space Odyssey quite yet, but it's certainly not Teddy Ruxpin either.
How do we, one of the things that I see, and I say it too, it's still a garbage in, garbage out world. I mean, we saw, what was it, the Genesis AI bot?
Gemini, yeah.
The Gemini AI, abject failure. Couldn't spit out anything. Couldn't even spit out a white male pope on an image.
Well, with that
and those
one,
kind of things.
I think,
What is that? Is that the guardrails you're talking about, or are they training it on something, or is it a combination of both?
I think with that one, I've never seen a real clear explanation for what happened, but what does seem pretty clear is that from the top level at Google, this was Google's AI Gemini in its first, I believe the first iteration. And this was when, this must have been 2 years ago or so now, but people were querying it for, make a Viking or make a picture of the founders or whatever, the U.S. founders. And it would be black. They would all be black or Native American, or they would be, race swapped in some way. So it was just kind of like a parody of that liberal tendency to try to boost diversity. But nobody, I don't think anyone at Google meant for that to happen. They meant for the robot to be, or for the chatbot to be more diverse and race sensitive, right, in its responses. They certainly didn't mean for it to come out like that, and they didn't mean to become a laughing stock because of it. So it kind of shows you how basically, if you want to boil it down to a kind of caricature of what, of the situation, or a parody, what they did is they created a chatbot and said, don't be racist. In fact, be anti-racist. And the result was comical. It was basically like, if the old paperclip maximizer analogy. If you tell a machine, make paperclips, and it begins turning everything into paperclips, and you can't stop it. It's sort of like that. But the thing is that was only a couple of years ago. Now the new model of Gemini, it's got problems, but it is just leaps and bounds beyond what that one was, especially in reasoning, coding, things like that. So I'll tell you a quick anecdote, Rob. When Meta first started pushing the metaverse, when I first started covering tech for the War Room, and I really thought, because of the pandemic, the lockdowns and all of this, I really thought that virtual reality was going to take off, and that millions upon millions of people would disappear into their own brain stems with VR helmets on their heads, right? I tried some really, really good VR, and that was kind of what gave me this feeling, right? And so I basically, I mean, I didn't make any hard predictions, but I basically predicted that this was finally virtual reality's moment and the metaverse would be a thing. And that
Hmm.
collapsed in on itself completely. So it's
Yeah.
really easy to be wrong about these sorts of things. I also, though, by the way, I didn't think humanoid robots would be remotely close to as good as they are in as many companies as they are today. So it's very difficult to predict these things. Very difficult.
Yeah. Oh, it sure is. I don't want to predict it, but I am using them. I'm using them. We'll talk about that when we come back from this break, Joe.
Oh
My
no.
guest today, yeah, my guest today is Joe Allen, and the author of Dark Aeon, and it's a fascinating book. You got to go get it. You can find it on Amazon and at Joe's website on his X account. We'll be right back with Joe Allen.
But with Brandon, it's always cutting edge stuff happening in the world, and it's not just from the political angle, because you can get that on other platforms, but it's always from the biblical angle. So you're dealing with a guy that loves Jesus. You're dealing with a guy that's very intelligent. You're dealing with a guy that is cutting edge conservatism, and you're dealing with a guy that wants to be biblical all at the same time. And so for that reason alone, I hope many, many people will not just lift up his ministry in prayer, but will also financially get behind it, because he, from the angle I'm trying to describe, he really is the only game in town. And we desperately need it in these last days. Can I get an amen to that?
Machines that think for themselves. Artificial intelligence that mimics the human brain and human thought processes. AI writes books, creates videos and images. With the click of a button, it analyzes data. Amazing technology that is in its infancy. Where is AI technology heading? Who's behind it? What is the goal? AI is promoted as an advantage to medicine, science, better living for the world, and global cooperation, all to help humanity. Is it? Or is it machine versus man, a race for control of humanity? America is in the AI race, along with adversaries like China. It is a race to master and excel in AI technology. It is not a race we can afford to lose. If China takes the lead, is our national security and sovereignty compromised? It is said that China's race to the moon is to enhance their ability to establish satellites capable of monitoring the world. What purpose does AI play in this? What are the stakes? What are the concerns? Jobs, privacy, images and messages controlled by whom? What are the benefits and what are the threats? The most important essential for the well-being of freedom is who controls it? Already, U.S. politicians are looking into compromised computer programming that hacks into our privacy and influences families. Is AI a benefit or a curse? Is it too late to stop, or should we get on board and win the race?
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday, folks. I got to tell you, artificial intelligence or your own personal demon, is that what we really want? And my guest today is the author of Dark Aeon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity, Joe Allen, who's also the War Room tech editor and has a Substack, The Singularity Weekly. Go check it out. Joe, welcome back to the show. And Joe, you were a panelist on that. That's the opening clip from a panelist from NTD News that you were on that panel with three other folks and everything. But the opening clip is very, very telling because it walks through the issues and the questions that a lot of people have. You mentioned that you were surprised by the ability of the humanoid robots that we've seen today. Have you been up close and personal to an Elon Musk Optimus?
I have not yet, but I did actually. I did an interview with Amica. It's put out by Engineered Arts, and I was in California in December of 2023, So it's over a year ago, almost a year and a half ago now. I still never released it. Maybe I'll put it together and release it tomorrow. I don't know. The footage didn't come out all that well, but point being, I interviewed the robot, and the responses were actually pretty shocking. You know what? You've inspired me, listeners.
Yeah.
Check back in a week. I now announce I will release the interview with Amika. I did do another one. It's the same model, a different AI in the brain, so to speak, at the Las Vegas Sphere. And,
Okay.
a friend who I'd met in Vegas described she had been in it and described it as a temple to transhumanism. And sure enough, it absolutely was. It was astounding. If you've seen the Las Vegas Sphere, just an extraordinary LED dome that's capable of producing all sorts of wild visual effects. And then inside is a kind of similar dome that functions like a 360 theater. But as you go in, there are all of these monuments to robotics and technology. And then up in the foyer, there are 5 Amica robots. They call them Aura. It doesn't really matter. And you have these like plaques or placards that describe progressively the transhumanist ambition to go into the metaverse and to become immortal, to create sentient AI. And you can talk. And I interviewed that robot. I'll tell you what, too, if you check back in my Twitter account, I'll repost that interview. It was interesting. That AI wasn't as advanced, though, as the AI that was in California. All this is to say, the experience wasn't as mystifying as you would think. In fact, it's very demystifying because it really exposes the kind of limitations and the glitches that are inherent in these sorts of things. So it's not that I thought that the robots were about to come alive and kill everybody, but any inkling that I did was, for the most part, dispelled.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and that's kind of why I wanted to ask you if you had been up close, because I've worked with robots many years ago with bomb disposal robots that we were testing back then decades ago. They're still pretty good today. They're pretty good today, but they're basically working on the same type of articulation and those kind of things with a little bit of a mechanical improvement, because we really haven't come that far with appendages and fingers and wrist motions and those kind of things when it comes to that. Although Musk, I think if everything that we're seeing is accurate, Musk has done a really good job at that. And I've seen some other videos, like one of them on a gun range, the mechanical dog videos. It's hard to tell whether those are deep fakes, actual, or a mixture of the two, but it seems like we are moving pretty well. But the brain is what I'm interested in. And you kind of went, oh no, when I said I was using the AIs. Look, Grok is the one I've used the most. But what I've been doing with it is there's no better way to test it really for an individual like me, Mr. Average American, than to do things like asking the question, tell me all about myself, because I'm the one that knows myself. And I can be a gauge up against that model that Altman was talking about, the demon on your shoulder thing. That's every single thing. And it's kind of remarkable. I've got a pretty publicly known life, and everything's public record as far as I know. And it's pretty remarkable what that thing cannot figure out. It really is. Which is
and also kind of heartening, right? If it did give you like all these accurate descriptions of yourself and all these deep insights that you hadn't arrived at, the creepiness of that would be astounding. Although I know people who say that they are having these sorts of experiences with Claude. When you pay, you get a much better model, access to a much better model, and people who are using GPT. I don't know, because I don't use it at all. I refuse to. It makes me probably one of the worst tech editors ever, I guess, because I only know about what other people tell me. I just something we'll say it's superstitious and leave it at that. But I do think that this, let's say it's just going to stay where it's at and barely improve, right?
Right.
Even then, the problems are already manifesting on a large scale. It's a real big issue in schools. Kids are
Hmm.
using it to write their papers, to cheat. They become super dependent on it for answers if they are even trying to learn. And teachers are completely, they're pulling their hair out. They don't really know what to do because there aren't really rules and systems in place. And it's really an extension of processes that have been happening for decades, right?
Hmm.
The education system, by and large, has been very poor and has failed kids for a couple of generations now, at least many of them in many schools. And so
Right.
you already had kind of a rotten environment. And then they brought laptops into the classrooms. Some schools, in my own county in Tennessee, they had an experimental program some 10, 15 years ago where every student was given a laptop and everything was done on a laptop to bring these little young redneck tykes into the future, right? By the way, when I was a teacher, I refused to let any kid pull out a laptop in my class at all, except for one kid who had a broken arm. But every time I'd look over his shoulder, he was on Facebook. So, I mean, that's why I did it. But so this digitization process has been going on for a while. And
Hmm.
there are more and more e-learning platforms. And during the lockdowns and the school closures of 2020 and 2021, that really exploded in adoption because kids were kind of, parents were forced to subject their kids to this sort of thing. And then, fast forward just a few years, and you have these advanced chatbots that are good enough for rock and roll. And you have kids who are already kind of pre-digitized and
Hmm.
pre-acclimated to looking to a computer for as authority and also as a shortcut to whatever solution to any problem they have. And so it's going to have to. There will be schools, I think, that completely ban this sort of thing. And they go back to blue book, those paper blue book tests, and they make kids
Yeah.
write longhand and stuff like that, or use computers where there's no way to have any AI on it whatsoever. But there's going to be a lot of schools that go the other direction. And I'm sorry to say that for all of the positive accomplishments of the Trump administration on
Hmm.
AI, it is extremely depressing to watch what's going down. You've got, Linda McMahon pushing really hard to get kids using AI for learning and, blah, blah,
Hmm.
blah, AI
Yeah.
teachers. You've got the executive order that kind of authorizes the use of AI in the classroom that was just signed maybe a week ago. And then you, of course, had Trump endorsing the Stargate project, which, if it's realized, I mean, Larry Ellison of Oracle, who's a big component of that, he also has this vision of a computer system that knows everything about you and is intelligent enough to reason about you. And when I say
Hmm.
you, I don't just mean you and me. I mean
Right.
hundreds of millions of people, including DNA analysis to associate, certain behaviors and tendencies with DNA. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think that again, if it stays where we are right now, the biggest problem we have is not necessarily yet computers getting smarter. The biggest problem we have is human beings getting dumber. And we
Yeah.
didn't need a whole lot of help in that department. And it's just kind of pushing, it's accelerating that. It's accelerating human atrophy. And that is an enormous problem that is going to have to be grappled with, especially with kids. But these systems are as bad as they're ever going to be. Right? They perform
Hmm.
as poorly as they ever will. So there
Right.
is the possibility that they will gain a lot more capabilities. That context window that Altman's talking about will expand. That the reasoning
Hmm.
capabilities will expand. And the big threat there is, of course, well, you will have companies across the board replacing human beings with AI, and you'll have government agencies doing it. They already are trying, but it's not. It's still very, very, very early.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's I homeschooled my youngest son from seventh grade till he graduated from high school, and I used an electronic uh, uh, system, but it was not based on computers. It was based on real teachers. And teachers actually teaching in the classroom, and it required me to supervise it, even though he had a laptop and DVDs and that kind of stuff, and could go do research online. If you weren't there to watch over that and make sure they were following good guidelines and getting the information the way they needed to, that could go off the rails very easily. That's what I see happen during the pandemic. We got to take another break, Joe. When we come back, Well, I'm going to play a little clip from Klaus Schwab about the immortality of your AI. And we got a question from the audience for Joe, and we'll take that when we come right back on the Rob Maness Show.
You have the chance to look forward to a career of 50 years. In my own opinion, yeah, maybe more. You will get some injections and some and so on, and then don't forget your avatar will continue to live. So. And your brain will be replicated through artificial intelligence and algorithm. So we don't know, but at least 50 years.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. We're talking about artificial intelligence, and the demon on your shoulder, essentially. And that was dear leader of the world's globalism movement, Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, talking about being immortal, essentially having your brain replicated, your avatar lives on. I mean, they're really deifying this type of computer system, this large language model. My guest today is Joe Allen, the tech editor for Bannett's War Room and author of Dark Aeon, a book about this very subject, transhumanism and its war against humanity. Joe, before we talk about Mr. Herr Klaus there, let's take this question from the audience. Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you, Shel. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Colonel. The question I have is, what is the evolution of the architecture going to be? Because currently it's not sustainable. There's only 4 or 5 like hugely wealthy corporations that really control the large language models. Are they ever going to have a time where the large language models get democratized, where the front ends are provided by many different companies, almost like cell phone service, so to speak, that use different networks that you don't even know what network you're on? Same thing with AI. You don't know which large language model you're using. You're using this interface.
That's a great question, Joe.
Yeah, very much so. Just for background for the audience, right now, the big frontier models are coming out of OpenAI, that's ChatGPT, Google, that's Gemini. Grok actually is up there, and that's XAI, that's Elon Musk. And Meta AI is coming a long way, and that's up there. So, and then Anthropic, a kind of smaller or lesser known company that is really at the forefront of developing these large language models and other types of AI. So the question then, when will you start seeing more and more smaller players who are operating at the same or similar levels to these big companies with the frontier models? I think that more than likely, the big companies will always be quite a ways ahead of the smaller independent AI builders, right? People building AIs in their homes, and you can make a basic language model. You can actually download right now. Go to GitHub, download Llama, which was made and open sourced by Meta, and put that on a computer that's not connected to the internet, right? It's only on your computer, and you can use it kind of any way you can. It's got its limitations for sure, but you can do that. And there are a lot of other options like that. What we saw with DeepSeek from China and R1, it showed that with much fewer resources, less money. I think they probably lied about how much money they actually used. I also think they probably lied about the hardware that they used. They probably had better hardware. And they also distilled the model most likely from GPT, meaning that, like many Chinese technologies, is kind of a knockoff, right? But it was good enough that people were saying, oh, this is the end of OpenAI, or oh, this is the end of NVIDIA. It was not true. That was one prediction for sure that I got right. Yeah, I think that like what we see now with the open source AI, you can get an AI that's as good as GPT-3 easy as pie. And again, Llama is about there, right? And it's small enough that you can put it on a home computer. So it's kind of it's two-way answer to that. The frontier companies will remain at the frontier. You look at the Stargate project or the data center, the Colossus supercluster being built by Elon Musk and XAI in Memphis. These are massive operations. So nobody's really going to be able to compete with that. Not in the hardware, not in the amount of power, not in the amount of water, and most likely not in the amount of data that they're able to pour into these systems to train new AIs. But at the same time, where it's at now, as it becomes more streamlined and as you have other companies doing similar things that DeepSeek did, small independent startups even, then they're doing that right now. You will see them kind of catch up to where it's at right now pretty quickly, I think. One final point on that, though, the architecture that the caller referenced, this is also going to be really important. These companies want to build God in a box, right? That's the goal, to build the biggest, smartest thing in the universe, if aliens are not real. So what they want to do, it requires, like, this ambition requires like these massive resources, and they thought that maybe if you just keep scaling it up and making it bigger and bigger and bigger, like a bigger brain essentially, the large language model would become in essence self-improving. In essence, all these new reasoning capabilities would emerge, and they have to some extent. But a lot of others are critiquing this, rightfully so, as an approach, and they believe it's going to have to be some mixture so that these models can't just simply learn from human language and figure things out. They're going to need other modes. So they're going to need reasoning in physics, and that's what Elon Musk is working on with XAI, to have a machine that reasons from first principles, that reasons from physics. And then also Elon Musk and many others are developing these humanoid robots and other sorts of sensor systems to allow the AI to experience the world, the three-dimensional physical world we all inhabit, and understand that world and begin to reason from that. And so that's something fundamentally different from the large language model. It's not just words, right? It's not just book smart, so to speak. It's getting its hands dirty. And again, it's really anyone's guess as to how fast that will progress. But like some of the most aggressive predictions put that God in a box, that godlike AI, somewhere around 2030, which I'm very, very skeptical of this, but it's at least something to consider, that at the minimum, you're going to have extremely powerful technologies in the hands of a very small number of people. And I think that's probably the kind of reasoning that the people around Trump are feeding him and his administration, that if you don't do it, if America doesn't do it and doesn't build God in a box, then we'll all be, talking to Chinese chatbots instead.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what Musk said, too, before he got involved in politics with Donald Trump, wasn't it? When the discussion was going on about do we actually field this originally, and he was opposed to it, or at least he said he was. I'm not sure he actually ever was opposed to it. But then he changed his mind, so to speak, and said, I'm going to build one too, because if not me, to counter the dangers of some of these other models that are being developed right now, then nobody else will be able to do it. And that's the same argument that you just said about the government and the Trump administration. Do you think that's where it's coming from?
I think Musk is a huge influence on that. Absolutely. Others as well, though. Palantir has been a big player in this, and they oftentimes, I think, kind of ride under the surface of the conversation. Every now and then you'll have some libertarian organization. There are people like Whitney Webb has been really obsessed with Palantir and has done a ton of reporting on it. The Palantir, the company, was co-founded by Peter Thiel in the aftermath of 9/11, and it was largely created in order to analyze all of the data that was coming in from surveillance. And they do a number of other things, but primarily too, aside from national security or just security in general, they also do a lot of stuff with aggressive, war fighting AI. So they're partnering with Anduril, for instance, who is Palmer Luckey, who is a protege of Peter Thiel, to create better and better death drones that presumably can be autonomous and decide to kill or not kill on their own. Although Palmer Luckey, to his credit, has said at least that the ideal would be to keep a human in the loop. But Palantir has been a really big influence on the administration, and Peter Thiel has been a really big influence on Trump. Peter Thiel was with Trump back in 2015, 16. He's been with him for a long time. And with Palantir, you've got like all of these different projects that are going on, like to bring AI into the government, to bring AI into healthcare. You just had, I think yesterday, the day before, Robert F. Kennedy, I think to his discredit, boosting AI as a key way of moving healthcare forward, meaning that you have sensors all over your body that are basically doing what Sam Altman was talking about, but just with your body and trying to understand your body inside and out so you can manipulate it and make people well. Sounds good in theory, but if you think it's bad to have somebody an AI raking over your emails, think about an AI that's raking over your internal physiological state 24/7. The dangers are just tremendous, and Palantir is at least part of that. And so I guess the short version of all this is that Trump, from his own rhetoric, seems to believe what all of these other people believe, which is that AI, whatever its capabilities, will be a prime determinant in who is the wealthiest, who has the most powerful military, who has the kind of, in essence, the most knowledge and control over the domestic population. And so he's going for it. And, I get the reasoning, but I am completely against it. And if I could speak to Mr. Trump, I would, plead with him to at least try to put the brakes on some of these operations.
Yeah, I mean, their view, and they openly say it, and I have to agree with them, I think, on this, is that this development is inevitable now, unfortunately, because it's out of the box. Pandora's box is open. But what I'm concerned about, and we'll talk about this next segment because I'll have an opening clip from J.D. Vance as vice president about AI and everything and its impact on workers. But what I'm concerned about is take Palantir, for example. They're not transparent enough because they were born post 9/11, and all of that stuff's been cloaked in classification and secrecy and those kind of things. And that leaves it open, leaves itself and leaves all of us open to being feigted, to being fooled, and to being lied to by the government. We're at a point in time, Joe, where nobody, I served in the government for 32 and a half years of my life. My dad for 23. I don't trust anything that comes out of the government unless I can verify it. And I understand the classified stuff is one of those things. Unless I'm inside, I'm never going to be able to do that. But geez, we've got to figure out in that environment where this is going and how we can control it. And that's one of the big questions I want to get you to answer is what you're thinking about as to how human beings can keep this under control from our personal perspective on artificial intelligence, because I don't want a demon on my shoulder. We'll be right back with Joe Allen.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
This administration wants to be very clear about one last point. We will always center American workers in our AI policy. We refuse to view AI as a purely disruptive technology that will inevitably automate away our labor force. We believe, and we will fight for policies that ensure that AI is going to make our workers more productive, and we expect that they will reap the rewards with higher wages, better benefits, and safer and more prosperous communities. From law to medicine, manufacturing, the most immediate applications of AI almost all involve supplementing, not replacing, the work being done by Americans. Now, combined with this administration's worker-first approach to immigration, we believe that a U.S. labor force prepared to use AI to its fullest extent will instead attract the attention of businesses that have offshored some of these roles. To accomplish this, the administration will make sure that America has the best trained workforce in the world. Our schools will teach students how to manage, how to supervise, and how to interact with AI-enabled tools as they become more and more a part of our everyday lives. And as AI creates new jobs and industries, our government, businesses, and labor organizations have an obligation to work together to empower the workers, not just of the United States, but all over the country, all over the world. To that end, for all major AI policy decisions coming from the federal government, the Trump administration will guarantee American workers a seat at the table, and we're very proud of that.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. We're talking about artificial intelligence, and really, that nobody really wants a demon on their shoulder like Altman that ChatGPT talks about, or the immortality and my brain digitized like Herr Klaus Schwab of the globalist World Economic Forum talks about. But I think most people aren't opposed to advancing in the tools that man has created and is creating for himself. And my guest today is the author of Dark Aeon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity, Joe Allen, and the War Room tech editor. Joe, Vice President Vance's speech there, it hits at least the right tones from the way I saw it. But the bigger picture is how can the American worker, an individual like you or me, sitting at home, think about this developing technology as it's being fielded, jobs are changing, and keep their lives under the control of themselves as a human being? What are the recommended ways that we're going to see developed to do that? It seems like it may even be an unanswerable question.
It's a very difficult one. It's one that I've been trying to formulate for years now and have not. I'm sorry to tell you, Colonel Rob, that I do not have the answer to this problem, but I do have a few answers First, though, if I could just speak to what Vance was saying there, I mean, if you were to distill down all of my writing and reporting on AI and robotics and genetic engineering and whatnot over the last 4 years, it would basically be robots bad. It's as simple as that. Robots are bad. And now, if you were to distill what Vance is speaking about there, how he is framing this, and how many others are framing it, right? It's just that robots are good. And it's going to be a mixed bag no matter what. A lot of it's just not going to matter, but it's going to be a mixed bag. So I do think it's important to take both perspectives seriously. That being said, Vance has a lot of interest in this beyond that of a typical vice president, right? He himself is also a Peter Thiel protege and has invested in a number of biotech companies that made him very wealthy. So, he has a vested interest in seeing this go forward. So as to what to do about it, one thing I think that for the next couple of years that is just going to have to be accepted is that most likely the government is not going to step in and fix this for you. You look at the momentum of the Trump administration, it's probably among the most reckless in terms of policy in the world. Even the Chinese, who are pushing and pushing and pushing to catch up to America, have more sense of caution around this than the Trump administration. So in America, as Americans, number one, if you are on Team Robots Bad, like myself, then you just, I think, are going to have to prepare for the government to be against your interest in this, in the sense that the government is going to not do anything to control it or regulate it, and also is going to do everything to advance it and push it forward. So corporations are going to be a big part of this. Unfortunately, what I see from corporations, so for instance, Sam Altman really unleashed the possibility of a world in which the internet's just full of bots, and most conversations you're having on any social media platform or any kind of chat or any email, most conversations are going to be with bots. He created the problem of human verification. So he also is providing a solution to that problem, and that's in the form of World ID or WorldCoin, in which you have the evil orb. You take a snapshot of your retina, and your biometric data is then linked to your financial data and your government identity, and it's a way to verify your humanness online. Elon Musk doing something very similar with X, so that the verification is intended to be, to some extent, a way of weeding out bots and keeping the conversation human. So there are corporations that are creating this problem, are also corporations coming up with solutions. And I don't think that the mark of the beast orb is going to make life better or more pleasant for most people. So there's another option, though. And I think that on the personal and on the communal level and on the institutional level that we can control, there already are lots of people rejecting this. You see this movement of like free-range childhood and digital-free childhood. Jonathan Haidt is a big proponent of this, and others. He's a big lib, but he's good on this. And you I think, are going to see a lot of schools, a lot of parents, a lot of communities that say, we don't want to be lab rats in this experiment. And right now in America, you're free not to. That means you're going to miss out on the benefits, the supposed benefits, but you also don't have to worry about the detriments. That being said, and same with your company, right? That the company I referenced before, Klarna, they're a good case in point where you might be enticed to start firing your workers and bringing on AI, and the system is all full of glitches and not really better than humans. So, or it could go the other way. But on that level, if you have control over that, you can say no. Just like during the pandemic, we had to learn to say no, and I think this is one of those opportunities. But you're going to have to also live in a world where other people are saying yes, where other people are, in fact, submitting their entire lives to the kind of one-man surveillance state that Sam Altman's talking about, and creating AI clones. you're going to have to deal with in the coming decades. I guarantee you, you're going to have to deal with very awkward encounters with people who have dead loved ones in digital form that they interact with perhaps on a daily basis. And maybe you have to sit there at Thanksgiving dinner with, like, dead Uncle Fred on screen, or maybe robot dead Uncle Fred sitting there and, chatting it up about life in the early 2000s. I think that is something that the best way forward right now, because I do think that it's possible in the next couple of few years, after there are some real disasters that are caused by AI, the governments are going to be a lot more keen on bringing it under control and putting hard caps. Maybe it'll happen before, but I think it'll be after a disaster that happens. Up until that point, I think the best thing to do is just to simply recognize that even if the AI isn't getting better, the adoption is going to continue to spread. But most likely, the AI is going to get better. Maybe not that exponential takeoff that leads to a singularity, but it's going to get better. And so how do you live in a world in which people are cyborgizing themselves and cyborgizing their children and cyborgizing their companies, so that all the culture around you becomes like this deep enmeshing of human beings and human souls with machines? I think we already have a good taste of that with smartphones and social media. We already kind of have a sense of where that goes. And I think it's very, the way I conceive of it, Rob, is it's just like if your country was taken over by Muslims, or if your country was taken over by Marxists. You might be able to eke out an existence kind of in the shadows of that. And in a lot of places people do. But you are going to have to accept that the powers that be they basically have a different religious system, the whole worldview, than you do. Right now, they're talking about AI as a tool, and they're talking about AI as a teacher. More and more, they're using AI as companions. They're very soon going to be talking about AI as a creature with rights and consciousness, and their goal is to create AI as a god. It's a fundamentally religious quest, and it's one that if you do not share it, you're going to have to learn how to live out a life with coexistence with it. And unfortunately, for the near future, you're going to have to learn how to do that, in which the greatest companies on earth, the wealthiest men on earth, the most powerful government on earth is behind it, is suffused with techno-religion, otherwise known as transhumanism.
It's very biblical sounding, as in the book of Revelation. Very biblical sounding in the tribulation, Joe. Well, I think we've got one question left in the audience. Let's take that real quick before we get to the end of the show. Only got a few minutes left, though. Go ahead, Shell.
Hello, Vortex in the audience. What do you think about the parallels between large language models and the Tower of Babel? In Hebrew, Babel is linked to the verb balal, which means to confuse or to mix or to confound. Seems apt for the evolution of psychological warfare that will soon take place.
I think that is a fantastic observation. Others have made this observation. I think the more people kind of use these religious resources to make sense of this, I really do believe that if you don't go crazy with it, that these parallels are really important to understanding where we're at and where we're going. So with the Tower of Babel, all these cultures, they try to build a tower to heaven, and there's kind of this implicit, like, one language, right? Large language model. And everyone can basically communicate, and humanity gets too big for its britches, and so God separates everyone into different peoples, different tongues. You also have parallels, for instance, with the beast, the image of the beast that is able to speak in the book of Revelations, and people are forced to kind of bow down to it and take a mark of its name. I'm not a biblical literalist, nor am I a minister, nor am I a religious zealot, but I do believe that these stories symbolically are absolutely true. And that the depth of that, however one actually approaches this, I think the depth of it has to be reckoned with, that what we're witnessing is a profound cultural shift of biblical proportions. And if the technology does continue to improve and improve and improve, then we're talking about a technological shift of biblical proportions. And one thing I do believe quite literally is that the highest calling one can have is to devote oneself to God and devote oneself to others. And that is just beginning with that core, I think the best way to respond to the problem of technology, just like it's the same to respond to the problem of evil people and, the vicissitudes of nature. So yeah, that's my answer to that. Tower of Babel is a superb way of understanding where we're at.
Well, thanks, Joe. I appreciate you coming on, man. We'll have to do it sooner this time because things are moving fast, and I agree with you. Follow God, read, study, be ready, prepare, and act. That's what we have to do in order to make sure that we and our families can get through this and into the future. We'll see you tomorrow. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and Tom Renford talking about anthrax vaccines and what hasn't been done for those folks that needs to be done. I'll see you then on World YouTube.